From disease to accidents, danger and death are around every corner. Life's got a million ways to take you out, but what are some of the more bizarre ways to pass? Well, in this video, backed by popular request, we're going to take a look at not 5, not 6, but 7 bizarre deaths, reminding you that death can truly strike at any time. So strap in, draw the curtains, and let's get right into it. Sometimes the most bizarre tragedies are the ones that happen during the most ordinary of things. With that in mind, this case takes us to July 2023 in, and excuse my pronunciation, Llangwrdod, Wales, a small town in Powys, Wales. Living alone in Powys in a modest assisted living flat was 57-year-old Barry Griffiths. Now Barry is what you'd call a very private man. In recent years, Barry had suffered a bad stroke that left him with limited mobility in one of his arms. Barry lived on a ground floor flat, and he could be seen coming in and out frequently, until in July of 2023, he suddenly stopped. A week passed and his neighbours began to become worried. They knocked on his door and it fell silent. This was unusual even for someone as private as him, so they reported their concerns to the police. Something just didn't feel right, and the police soon arrived to conduct a welfare check. When officers arrived at Barry's flat and entered the property, what they found immediately set off alarm bells. Upon entering the flat, a pungent smell hit them in the face, the unmistakable stench of death. When they turned on the lights, they could see blood spray everywhere, all over the flat, on the walls, on the floor, even on the ceiling. In the kitchen, there was a large pool with a heavy blood trail leading down the hall and into the bedroom. Sadly, at the end of this trail was Barry. He'd died days ago and nobody had noticed. He was fully clothed with old dried blood all over his stomach. Upon inspection, they found a single wound to his abdomen. His phone was still there, his wallet was untouched, and his computer was exactly where he'd left it. There was no sign of a robbery or any sign of disturbance anywhere else in the flat. And so an investigation was launched. When detectives checked the kitchen, left open was the bottom drawer of his freezer. On the work surface in the kitchen, right next to the fridge freezer, were 2 uncooked rotten burgers, as well as a sharp knife and a bloody tea towel. In a bizarre kitchen accident, Barry, with his hindered movement, fatally wounded himself trying to separate the frozen burgers with a sharp kitchen knife. The blade plunged deep, rupturing vital organs and blood vessels. The blood loss would have been instantaneous and heavy. Another contributing factor in his death was atherosclerosis, hardening of their arteries, likely affecting how much he bled from the wound. Unfortunately, the local police didn't discover Barry's body until over a week after he died. He'd been there decomposing the entire time. Barry was living alone, he was hungry, trying to make a meal, and all because of just one simple mistake, a routine task became fatal. Next up, we've got a bizarre case that I'm sure we've all had nightmares about, but sadly in this case, it wasn't a nightmare. It was very real and very horrifying. This entry takes us to the city of Bakersfield, California, on Wednesday night of August the 25th, 2010. As darkness settled on the area, at approximately 10:15 p.m., a car pulled up outside a house on La Mirada Drive in Bakersfield. Driving the vehicle was 49-year-old Dr. Jacqueline Kotarak. That night, Jacqueline had had a few drinks at a restaurant, and she was upset with her estranged boyfriend, 58-year-old William Moody. She decided after a few drinks that she was going to sort things out in person. She got a taxi over to William's house on La Miranda Drive, determined to have it out with him face to face. Now Jacqueline, or Dr. Kotarak, had an IQ of 170. She was at a certified genius level and had graduated top of her class at UCLA Medical School. She ran a busy medical practice where she saw as many as 200 patients a week. She was known as a kind doctor who even provided medication to patients free of charge when they couldn't afford it. But that night, none of that intelligence seemed to help her avoid a horrific, bizarre fate. In the darkness, she got out of her car and walked up to the front door and knocked. She waited, but there was no answer. So, she tried the door and it was locked. She peered inside the windows, and inside the house, the lights were on, so someone must have been in. William, her boyfriend, had seen her pull up in the car, and while she was outside trying to get in, he'd slipped out the back door and left quietly, hoping to avoid a confrontation, especially after alcohol's involved. Most people would call, text, knock, and then maybe give up and go home. However, Jacqueline chose to not do any of that. After nobody answered the door, she saw red and grabbed a shovel that was sitting outside the home and tried to break in. But this proved unsuccessful. When that didn't work, she spotted a ladder leaning against the side of the house and devised an ingenious plot to get inside. Jacqueline climbed up onto the roof. Then she removed the chimney cap, and without much thought, she slid into the chimney feet first. Now here's the problem. Chimneys aren't like they are in the movies. Santa can't fit down the chimney. This chimney in particular was only 15 by 7 inches at its largest point, and narrowed down to just 4 inches at its base. It was physically impossible for a human to squeeze in. Jacqueline didn't consider any of this. As she wiggled down the dirty brickwork, she then got stuck about 2 feet above the fireplace opening. She tried to move, but she was wedged in tight. She couldn't move up, she couldn't move down, she was totally stuck. So there she was. She would have been screaming down the chimney, screaming for her boyfriend to help, but she had no idea that he'd already left for the evening. She was totally alone and trapped in an enclosed space. She would have been slowly suffocating and praying to God that someone came to help her. But unfortunately, that just didn't happen. On Thursday, August the 26th, Jacqueline failed to show up to work. Her office staff reported her missing to the police, as it was very unusual for her to miss any days at work, as she was one of the leading doctors in her practice.
Police say Dr. Jacqueline Kodarak was last seen Wednesday with her boyfriend. Colleagues became alarmed when she didn't show up to work the next day.
Her purse was there with her phone, all her money, all her credit cards, all that stuff.
Her assistants and her boyfriend both began a vigorous search, starting at his house where he'd last seen her. They combed through the house, but unfortunately they failed to find her. She was right under their nose. Then came Saturday, August the 28th, 3 days after she climbed onto the roof. A house sitter came by to feed Moody's fish, and that's when they noticed a strong smell, as well as dark, disgusting fluid oozing from the fireplace. Firefighters were called, and Jacqueline was dead. She'd died from mechanical asphyxiation days ago, a horrible and tragic way to go. Where she'd been stuck, it was physically impossible to retrieve her by dragging her out. It took 5 grueling hours late Saturday night to extract her decomposing body.
Police in Bakersfield, California are investigating what's being called a freak accident, one that left an area doctor dead inside the chimney of a home. On Friday, neighbors said they could start to smell something, but they didn't think much of it.
Someone down the street said they thought they heard someone yelling quietly for help.
It wasn't until Saturday when someone came over to care for some animals that Dr. Kodarak was found, just above the fireplace opening.
Everyone thought she was missing. Bill, us, everyone was looking for her.
It took firefighters 5 hours to get Kodarak's body out of the chimney. Investigators think she climbed onto the roof, removed the chimney cap, and then slid down the flue feet first. Why she did it remains under investigation.
Given how smart she was, her family suspected foul play. They just couldn't believe that someone that smart could make such a silly decision. But police found nothing to support it, and eventually the coroner ruled her death an accident, stating that she made an unbelievable error in judgment and nobody will ever understand why. Tragically, one mistake, a single misjudgment, especially while under the influence of alcohol, can take your life. It's tragic and horrifying that she got stuck, and I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. Next up, we've got a shocking and heartbreaking case that unfolded in Lupton, near Camforth in Cumbria, on the 27th of October, 2023. That day, 29-year-old John Oates, known as Harry to his friends and family, was visiting his parents near Kendal. Harry was an aerospace engineer living in Bristol, and he'd just had some exciting news. That week, he'd had an offer accepted on his very first flat. He was about to turn 30 and had set himself a personal goal to visit 30 countries before his birthday. For his birthday, Harry was training for a charity half marathon. So, that Friday morning, at around 11:50 a.m, he left his parents' house to go on a training run. His mother told him to take care as he headed out, unaware that those would be her final words that she'd ever get to say to him. Harry's route that day took him along a public footpath through the fields at Badgergate in Lupton, surrounded by rural Cumbrian countryside with scenic views. This was the kind of run that he'd probably done many times before while visiting home, and that day, nothing was out of the ordinary. Back at their house, Harry's parents waited for him to come back, expecting him to return within an hour, but 2 hours passed and he was nowhere to be seen. They thought that maybe he'd bumped into friends along his route and maybe stopped for a chat or a drink, but as the afternoon wore on and his phone kept ringing with no answer, concern began to grow. Fearing something had happened, his father, Malcolm, decided to use the Find My iPhone app to track Harry's location. Harry's phone signal was coming from a field about a 10-minute walk from their home. So, Malcolm and Harry's brother set out to find him. At 4:34 p.m, Malcolm was walking along with his son along the same footpath that Harry had, and in the distance, he could see something white on the ground. At first, he thought it might be farm debris, but as he got closer, the horrifying reality set in. Turns out, hours ago, at approximately 7 minutes past 2, as Harry was running along the footpath, something went catastrophically wrong. As he ran, earphones in, he came into contact with a low-hanging 11 kilovolt electricity wire. Because he was running, the wire wrapped around his neck and pumped his body with 11,000 volts, killing him on the spot. When his family members found him, Harry was lying on the ground with his head and neck elevated about a foot to 18 inches off the ground. His neck was suspended by the 11,000 volt cable that had burnt halfway through his throat. The wire was black and singed, and apparently they could even see bone. Emergency services were called to the scene, but there was nothing they could do to help him but officially declare him dead at 6:35 p.m. But what the heck was a live electrical cable dangling low enough for someone to run into it? The investigation revealed some shocking truths. The wire had been released from its usual position over 8 meters high 2 days earlier, on October the 25th at around 4 p.m. It turns out that the low-hanging line had been caused by a simultaneous failure of both porcelain tension disc insulators. These insulators are components that hold the power lines in place while preventing the electricity from travelling down the pole. When the insulators failed, the fault was detected as a phase-to-phase transient fault by the electrical network monitoring systems. This system automatically reconnected the power in accordance with standard procedure for Electricity Northwest Limited, the company that was responsible for the network. There was no reason for anyone to suspect a cable was dangling at head height across a public footpath, so they didn't cut off the electricity to the wire. For 2 full days, the cable remained live, fully energized, undetected and unreported, hanging low across a public footpath, a death trap just waiting for someone to walk into it. Tragically, Harry was just the unlucky one. At the time, there was no automatic system in place to detect low-hanging power lines. The electricity industry relied entirely on members of the public spotting it and reporting it. But this cable was in a rural field. Nobody had noticed it, so therefore, nobody had reported it.
It was his father who first found Harry, a memory he says will stay with him forever.
Every minute of every day, it's in your mind. It's in your mind, the injustice of it. We have a very, very good support network of close family and friends. However, I feel lonely. There's one thing missing, and it just makes me feel lonely.
When investigators checked this particular pole and checked the failed insulators, they found that they had voids in their cement fill and allowed internal discharge to occur. This caused damage over time, and this is what caused the insulators to fail electrically. While a single insulator failure were recognized as something that could happen and has happened, The failure of 2 porcelain insulators at the same time had never ever been witnessed before. Multiple people at his inquest described it as the first incident to our knowledge. It was very unique, unprecedented, and extremely rare. Senior coroner for Cumbria, Kirsty Gomersau, she said while the failure mode was very rare and complex, there was a risk of future deaths. As part of the electricity grid's investigation after Harry's death, they examined and tested approximately 270 porcelain insulators from across their specific network and showed that 73% of their insulators contained voids in the cement. In response to her findings, ENWL brought in a number of measures. They stopped using porcelain insulators entirely, and they also deployed line-sight AI detection technology across 77% of their network, which can identify low-hanging lines and detect signs of internal insulator stress before the failure occurs.
And Electricity Northwest say our heartfelt sympathies remain with Harry Oates' family at this time. This was a tragic incident, which both the coroner and health and safety executive noted involved a rare and complex sequence of events that were unforeseeable. Safety is our number one value, and we will continue to work with other distribution network operators and the industry trade body ENA on learnings from this immensely sad accident.
Despite these changes in the right direction, Harry's family are still campaigning for greater awareness and mandatory replacement of all porcelain disc insulators nationwide. The inquest fell short of finding ENWL responsible for Harry's death, but the family still holds the power company personally responsible.
Well, it could happen tomorrow. It could happen tomorrow. Porcelain disc insulators are known to fail both electrically and mechanically. And these insulators are over 60 years old in some cases.
The image of Harry lying in that field continues to haunt the family, and I'm sure it will do forever.
For the family, they plan on replacing the stone marking the spot of the incident with a monolith of a runner to act as a permanent memorial to the son they lost. Gabriel Morris, ITV News, Nick Kendall.
Next up, we've got a case that shows just how quickly your life can be taken from you through absolutely no fault of your own. This entry takes us to Townsville, Australia, on the morning of March the 3rd, 2010. It was a normal Wednesday morning, and at around 8 AM, a 42-year-old woman by the name of Murica Jenny was walking to work along Eyre Street in North Ward. Murica was a Papua New Guinean-born mother of 3, just doing her normal morning routine, her normal commute on the footpath. As she walked, on a vacant block at 67 Eyre Street, a man named Michael Rowley was starting his workday. Michael was operating a tractor with a 7-foot slasher attachment, which is basically a large industrial lawnmower used for cutting overgrown vegetation. The block that Michael was working on that day was seriously overgrown, as it hadn't been cut since September 2009, over 6 months earlier. Michael drove the tractor towards the front of the lot and began to turn it parallel to the road, facing southeast. As he made this turn, completely out of the blue, the spinning slasher blade made contact with a length of metal pipe that was hidden deep in the overgrown grass. It was an accident waiting to happen. The blade, spinning at high speed, launched the pipe out of the rear opening of the slasher like a speeding bullet. Murica was standing just 50 feet away, stood at the wrong place at the wrong time. The metal pipe flew through the air, traveling at a speed of an estimated 100 to 150 miles an hour. It traveled towards Murica and struck her directly in the head, causing devastating head injuries. Michael had no idea she was even there. The pipe was thrown with such force, it kept going, landing around 65 meters beyond where Murica had fallen. The sheer force behind it was insane. Upon hearing what had happened, Michael got off the mower and rushed to Murica's aid, but it was clear she had died instantly upon impact. The local police sergeant attended the scene, speaking to reporters later, saying that it was a total tragedy that Murica was in the exact trajectory of the pipe. 2 years later, in 2013, a coroner investigated Murica's death, discovering that this could have been entirely preventable. The coroner's investigation revealed that multiple people had failed to read the instruction manual for the equipment. it specifically warned about the dangers of projectiles and recommended a 328-foot exclusion zone when working near public spaces like footpaths or roads. Of course, Murica was far, far closer than this. She should have never been anywhere near it. The instructions also recommended that the user did an initial higher cut first to identify and remove any debris. But sadly, none of this was done, and it led to a tragic, bizarre death. Now this is an entry that you may or may not be aware of, as it's been told many, many times, but it's one that's strange and certainly bizarre. This entry begins on April the 10th, 2018 in Cincinnati, Ohio. That day, 16-year-old Kyle Plush, sophomore at Seven Hills School in Cincinnati, was heading to a school tennis match. That afternoon was set to be his first ever match. He'd spent ages on the practice squad and had finally made it. He was described as incredibly popular, a class clown, but he had spinal development problems and other medical issues that affected his mobility. Despite this, he loved sports and pushed through all of it. That day, after finishing a maths exam, it was time for his tennis match. But before he could do this, he needed to grab his equipment from his family's 2004 Honda Odyssey minivan parked in a parking lot across from his school. He walked across the road, unlocked the van, slid open the side door, and climbed into the back. His tennis racket and gear were stored in the rear cargo area behind the third row bench seat. This bench could be folded and stored in the trunk. He clambered over to get it and put one knee on the third row seat and reached over into the rear cargo well to grab his equipment, and as he did, the seat's latch, which hadn't been properly fastened, suddenly gave way beneath him. The heavy metal frame seat flipped violently backwards, sandwiching him upside down. His head was trapped in the rear cargo well, with his legs pinned in the air against the van's rear door. Suddenly, a simple job to retrieve his gear had placed him in a situation that he never thought possible. He simply couldn't move. His arms were pinned. The bench seat was pressing approximately 80 pounds of pressure directly onto his chest. Every breath would have been a painful struggle, and unfortunately, his phone was in his pocket, completely out of reach. Trapped under the seat, Kyle suddenly had an amazing idea. Using his voice, he activated Siri on his phone and called 911 at approximately 3:14 p.m. Audibly gasping between words, he repeatedly said, "Help, help, I need help." He told the call handler that this was not a joke and that he was going to die. Unfortunately, as the phone was in his pocket, he could not hear the dispatcher, who continued to ask questions. The call taker labelled the call as unknown trouble and dispatched 2 officers to the car park. However, the call handler never conveyed the urgency of what she'd heard. 2 officers arrived at 3:26 p.m. and spent 11 minutes patrolling the parking lots looking for anyone in distress. They drove around in the patrol car, but failed to actually get out and leave the vehicle to search for him. They marked the incident closed and went back into service, believing the call to be a prank call. At this time, Kyle was still alive. At 3:35 p.m, while the officers were still nearby, he used his voice again to ask Siri to call 911 a second time. On this call, his voice was faint, but his words were clear. He repeatedly begged officers to be sent. He listed his exact location, the make of the car, the colour, and that he probably didn't have much time left.
Hello? I'm gonna die here. Where are you? I probably don't have much time left. To tell my mom and I love her if I die. This is not a joke. This is not a joke. I'm trapped inside my gold Honda Odyssey van in the Southwood parking lot of Seven Hills, Beth. Send officers immediately. I'm almost dead.
On this second call, the call taker accidentally activated the TTY function, a system designed for deaf callers. This drastically lowered the volume of the call, and therefore she couldn't hear Carl's voice anymore. She ended the call and didn't enter in any information on the computer-aided dispatch system, which froze while she was on the phone. The officers still at the scene were never told that a second call had come in, and they weren't even told that the caller said that he was almost dead. They just weren't aware of the urgency. Hours went by, and Kyle was not found. At around 8 p.m. that day, a classmate contacted Kyle's family, saying that he never showed up to his tennis match. His family immediately called the police and used Kyle's phone to track his location, which led them straight to the parking lot. To his absolute horror, there he found his son under the collapsed seat. Kyle had died from positional asphyxiation hours ago.
Tennis equipment when he got trapped in the trunk well of his vehicle. He managed to call 911, not once, but twice.
I'm gonna die here.
The 16-year-old gave the dispatcher details of his location and a description of the minivan, but police weren't able to find him and thought the call might be a prank.
When news broke of this, people were furious, and Kyle's family were devastated. How could law enforcement let this happen? He phoned twice, begging for his life, and he wasn't taken seriously. The investigation that followed revealed a catastrophic series of failures at Cincinnati's Emergency Communications Center.
This young man was crying out for help. We weren't able to get that information to the officers on the scene, and we need to find out why.
Because of this, Kyle's family sued the city of Cincinnati for wrongful death. On the third anniversary of Kyle's death, the city eventually settled, paying the Plush family $6 million, the second largest settlement in the city's history. To avoid this ever happening again, things changed in Cincinnati for the better. Officers are now required to get out of their cars and search on foot when responding to 911 calls, especially when they go silent or are dropped. The city also committed $250,000 to an independent review of their 911 system. No criminal charges were ever filed against the call takers or the officers involved. But here's the bizarre detail that will stay with you. 2 months before his death, Kyle had taken part in a school hackathon competition. His idea, a modification to the Apple Watch that would send a person's pinpoint location as well as their vital signs directly to first responders if they were trapped and unable to call 911. Hauntingly, this exact technology could have saved his own life. Next up, we've got a truly horrifying case, one that even shocked me reading. It begins on the 15th of September 2018 in Wolverhampton, England. That day, for workers at Timmins Waste Services, it was just another Saturday shift. They donned their high-vis jackets and their hard hats, ready for another monotonous day at work. For a bit of background, Timmins Waste Services, located on Manda Street, was a family-run waste management and recycling business that processed commercial waste, wood, metal, and any general rubbish. Staff on site would shred and dispose of tons and tons of local waste. A tedious and hard job, but a job that had to be done nonetheless. One of those workers was 29-year-old David Willis. David was a labourer at the yard. He would be asked to do various tasks around the site. His jobs consisted of moving waste, operating machinery, clearing blockages, as well as general manual labour. Whatever needed doing on the site throughout the day. David lived locally with his mother in Tipton, and by all accounts, he was a loving son and a brother who would do anything for anyone. The yard manager was 53-year-old Brian Timmins. He ran the day-to-day operations. The company was run by the Timmins brothers as a family business, and he was in charge of making sure everything on site ran safely and smoothly. That Saturday morning, David showed up to his shift like always. The yard was busy, skips came in and out, waste was being sorted. Everything was routine until a problem developed with one of the main pieces of equipment. The industrial shredder had jammed. This shredder was a massive machine designed to shred wood and other commercial waste. The kind of heavy-duty equipment that could tear through timber, metal, basically whatever you threw at it with ease. But that day, something had blocked it, and it needed to be cleared before work could continue. Brian Timmins made a decision about how to deal with the blockage. Instead of shutting the machine down completely and following proper safety procedures, he decided that he was going to use a digger to lift David Willis up onto the shredder so that he could clear the blockage from above while the machine was still running. CCTV cameras around the yard captured everything that happened next. The footage shows David being lifted up on a JCB grapple arm, a type of excavator attachment used for grabbing and moving waste material. All on camera, he's positioned on top of the shredder, and you can see him kneeling on the machine, trying to clear whatever was jamming it. He's leaning over, working above the shredder, all while it's still on. David cleared the blockage, and at that same second, with the force of it clearing, the momentum caused David to fall forward into the machine. The industrial shredder minced him. The meshing blades tore him apart and killed him instantly. This machine was designed to destroy wood, metal, and any commercial waste. It barely struggled as it tore through his skin, muscle, and bone. David was gone in an instant. But what happened in the minutes and hours after his death, this is where the case becomes bizarre and shocking. The CCTV footage shows Brian Timmins' response. As soon as David fell in, he got out of the digger and then could be seen looking around the yard, clearly aware that something had gone catastrophically wrong. He walks over and peers into the shredder's hopper, where David had just disappeared, and then he pulled out his phone and called David's mobile number. Obviously, there was no answer. He can be seen looking out the yard gates before running around the site, checking different areas, pretending like David had gone missing. Then he goes back to the digger and then just continues operating the shredder as if nothing had happened. As if he hadn't just lifted a colleague inside the jaws of death minutes ago. As the machine kept running, he stood by as David's remains, what was left of him at least, continued to be shredded along with the waste. He didn't phone any emergency services, and no alarm was raised. The next day, on Sunday, September the 16th, Brian Timmins and other employees loaded up 80 tons of recycled waste from the previous day and drove it to Poplar's landfill site in Cannock, Staffordshire. Here, they just dumped it. That Sunday evening, David's mother, Caroline, realized something was wrong. Her son hadn't phoned her as he usually did every night. He hadn't checked in at all. Nothing. Just before 11 p.m, she phoned Brian Timmins directly. She asked if he'd seen her son, and Timmins told her that he had not seen David since the morning, when he had up and left on the job and walked up the road. He also told this to another colleague who wondered about his whereabouts, but of course, this was all a complete lie. By that night, David was still nowhere to be seen, so his mother Caroline reported him missing to the police. It wasn't until Monday, September the 17th, 2 full days after David's death, that Timmins reported anything to the police. He only did so after David's coat was found by co-workers at the yard, making it obvious that he'd been there on Saturday. When police attended Timmins' waste services, one of the first things they reviewed was the CCTV footage from around the yard on the day of his disappearance, and of course, they discovered the footage. The video showing David falling and his boss continuing about his day like nothing had occurred. The whole disgusting event had been captured on camera. After discovering the CCTV, police immediately arrested Timmins and charged him with gross negligent manslaughter, as well as perverting the course of justice. The police immediately launched a major search operation at Poplar's landfill site where they dumped the waste. Somewhere in that landfill, mixed in with all the shredded wood and rubbish, was David's remains. The police knew that 80 tons of waste had been delivered there on September the 16th, so all they had to do was find a part of him. Officers sifted through the mountains of shredded waste with a fine-tooth comb, looking for any trace of him whatsoever. But there was nothing. They didn't find his phone, or a single shred of bone or skin. Nothing. Nada. The search went on for over 2 months, and all they ever found was part of his high-vis vest, and that was it. Even to this very day, not a single piece of David's body was ever recovered. His family never got any parts of his body back to lay him to rest, They couldn't mourn properly. A shocking and horrible outcome for a family searching for answers and closure. The prosecution's case was very straightforward. They argued that Timmins knew that David had died in the shredder. He knew that some sort of criminal investigation or judicial proceedings were inevitable, and he took active steps to interfere with evidence and conceal the facts of his death. The industrial shredder came with a detailed operator's manual that explained exactly how to operate the machine safely. It made absolutely crystal clear that the machine must be completely shut off before any kind of maintenance or blockage clearing. The machine was still operational when David was lifted onto it, a catastrophic breach of basic safety procedures. In December of 2023, over 5 years after David's death, Brian Tibbins was convicted of gross negligent manslaughter and was sentenced to only 7.5 years in prison. He'll only serve 2/3 of that sentence before being released on bail. The jury could not reach a verdict on the charge of perverting the course of justice. Despite having it all on CCTV, the allegations about the cover-up could not be proved, despite even lying to his mother and colleagues about him walking up the road. Sadly, in this case, David's mother never got to say goodbye to her son. She never even got to bury him. His body was scattered into a million pieces, dumped in landfill like he was nothing. All because his manager wasn't bothered about safety. He was more concerned about profits, keeping the shredder going, and he was more concerned about covering his own arse than doing the right thing. And last, but certainly not least, this tragic and horrifying and bizarre incident unfolded on the night of August the 10th, 2023, near Austin, Texas. That night, 3 hunters from Florida, 37-year-old Delvis Garcia, 26-year-old Denise Martinez, and 45-year-old Noel Benitez were out for what they thought to be a typical hunting trip. They traveled from Miami to meet up with a local friend, a man from Red Rock, Texas, who knew the area well. He knew of all the hunting locations, and so he was their guide. The 4 of them were accompanied by their dog, a loyal bloodhound who was key to their hunting routine. But that night, the evening was quiet. Stars shined over the cornfields as they worked through the area, and throughout the evening, they hunted in the fields. But around 1 a.m. on Wednesday morning, something terrible would occur. As they were hunting, their bloodhound escaped from the truck and bolted into a dense cornfield. One of the hunters, Delvis, chased after him, and they both disappeared into the corn before any others could follow. As the bloodhound sprinted through the field, Delvis was following, and suddenly he heard a loud yelp and the splashing of water. In the dark, Delvis rushed to the noise to discover the bloodhound stuck and struggling in a pit of water deep into the ground. Upon shining his torch into the hole, he realized that he was looking at a cistern in the middle of the cornfield with 0 safety barriers, completely unprotected. The cistern was buried deep in the ground with a tight, roughly 4-foot wide entrance and contained 8 feet of water at the bottom. But the water level was nowhere near the top, meaning once you entered, the walls were too high and too slick to climb back out. Delvis, of course, didn't know this, so he lowered himself into the cistern to save their dog from drowning. But once inside, he realized he had no way to actually get out. It dawned on him that he'd put himself in the exact same situation. He was stuck. To make things even worse, the water was chock-a-block full of other dead animals that had fallen into the exact same death trap. They were also unable to escape before perishing. The other hunters waited at the truck for Delvis to return, but the night was silent. So they used apps on their phone to track down where the dog had gone, using a GPS locator on its collar. When they got close, they could hear the splashing and the shouting, and so they came running. Arriving quickly, his friends Denise Martinez and Noel discovered that their friend was trapped in the cistern. Now usually you'd just have to tread water until you could be rescued, but because of the amount of decomposing animals that were also inside the cistern, they were releasing deadly hydrogen sulfide gas, exactly like a septic tank would. The gas was invisible and way past lethal concentrations. Delvis was in the water for just mere minutes, inhaling these fumes, and he was already on the verge of passing out and drowning. Seeing the urgency, His friends Denise and Noel removed their clothing and boots to prepare to go in after him. As they began undressing, Delvis suddenly passed out in the water below. It was now life or death. Quickly, one friend jumped in to help save him, while the other remained above ground to try and help them out. In the struggle, another fell in, leaving the fourth member of the hunting party standing there, panicking and not knowing what to do to help. Watching a true nightmare unfold in front of his eyes, he made the right call. He decided to not jump in and instead reached into his pocket to call 911. But when he reached in, he discovered that he'd left it in the truck. He ran back to the vehicle and called 911 for help before returning to the pit to find it completely still. All three friends, including their dog, were gone. Emergency services rushed to the scene, arriving at the location in the 300 block of New Trails in northern Bastrop County at around 1:45 a.m. But tragically, they were too late. All three had now passed out from the fumes and drowned in the cistern. The dog had also perished as well. Rescue crews tried their best to retrieve the bodies, but their efforts were severely hampered by the hazardous conditions. The fumes were just so overpowering, the stagnant water was toxic, and there were serious concerns about the structural integrity of the cistern's walls.
People were found dead and multiple dogs in this field directly behind me. It is believed that those victims were chasing the dogs before falling into the septic well.
First responders from several agencies working for several hours to extract victims from a well filled with water at New Trail and County Road 461.
3 people and a dog died in an underground tank near Austin in what police say was a freak accident. The Bastrop County Sheriff says 3 hog hunters were visiting from Florida when their dog fell into a hole in a cornfield. 2 men and 1 woman went in after it, but the hole was an old, uncovered cistern. It was filled with this dangerous gas, so it's believed those hunters were overcome by hydrogen sulfate gas.
They're probably deep. They're man-made. It's going to be a chore getting down there. I know. Even they're going to have the right machinery and everything, I imagine.
A neighbor that wants to remain anonymous is shocked by the police presence in a quiet community.
What they were doing there at midnight in the middle of a cornfield, I don't know.
The water level was 6 to 8 feet down below that, so you can imagine that once they got in there, they cannot reach the top. And then with the gas added to that, I don't know how long the pathologist will have to tell us that.
The cornfield is off limits and there are not any known septic wells in the field.
The recovery operation became extremely complex. First, they had to pump out the water, then they ventilated the cistern to remove the hydrogen sulfide gas and stabilize the air, and even then, they weren't even sure if the walls would hold. Finally, at around 7:30 p.m. that evening, nearly 19 hours after the initial call, Bastrop County Sheriff's Office investigator David Newman volunteered to be lowered into the cistern to recover the bodies. Newman was successfully lowered into the hole and recovered all 3 victims as well as the dog. Now this one was bloody shocking. I've actually covered a similar death on this channel before, where a whole family fell into a manure pit in China and drowned, leaving 1 family member alive. But in this case, this was a cistern, just sitting open in a cornfield, just waiting for someone to fall in. It's insane and bizarre that 3 people and a dog were gone in minutes, all trying to save each other. When authorities investigated the property, they found that the landowner had recently died, and the cistern had been left uncovered and unmaintained. There was simply no way that they could have known that there was an open, dangerous pit in the middle of a field, filled with toxic gas and water, until it was too late. Overall, nobody was held responsible for this. No one was ever charged in connection to the deaths. The landowner was dead, and so there was no one to be held accountable. To avoid a similar tragedy, Sheriff Cook urged landowners to check their cisterns and septic tanks often to ensure they're properly maintained and covered. The Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation warned that there could be thousands of these abandoned or deteriorating systems all across the state. Many may well be just like this, full of animals, full of toxic gas, just waiting for someone to fall inside. But that is the end of the video. May everyone featured rest in peace. Now, loads of you said that you want me to keep the end recap, so here we are. Starting from the top, we've got Barry Griffiths, who suffered a fatal knife wound while trying to separate burgers. This is why they always say to face knives and sharp blades away from you, no matter what you're doing. In the movies, people can be stabbed and they're fine. But in real life, a single stab wound can and has been lethal many times. It's sad that nobody found him for 7 days and that he just lay there rotting just feet away from other residents. Just tragic all round. Then we've got Jackie, who died in the chimney. What on earth was she thinking? Now, she must have been drunk to think that this was a good idea because she basically nutty pottied herself. The fact that neighbours smelt something disgusting and that they heard a faint call for help is just haunting. Why didn't they go check? They could have maybe saved her, but they just didn't. Of course, we can't forget Harry, who died on a simple run. That one shocked me. I've lived in villages before, and I've never considered that this could happen. It's not like I'm doing loads of running, but just the thought of it catching around my neck just makes me shudder. Personally, I do believe that the electrical company should be held partially responsible for this death. They created the poles. They should be on top of the maintenance, not using insulators with voids that are over 60 years old. The energy company didn't even fully replace them when they were confronted with the Future of Prevention Death report, a shocking reminder of how these big companies care about your well-being over profits. Then we've got Murica, who was smacked in the head with a pipe just walking down the street in the morning. That one was shocking. What are the chances that she was in the trajectory of the pipe? And the fact that she lost her life instantly on an ordinary day is just horrifying. It's tragic that she left 3 kids behind, all because of a pipe. Next up, we covered the Kyle Plush tragedy. Now, that's one I've wanted to cover for a long time. It's just horrifying the way he got stuck. It's one that many people are aware of because it went viral, because it truly was a nightmare-inducing situation that could have been avoided if officials took the call seriously. I'm glad the family got their compensation, but I'm more glad that reforms were made on the 911 system to avoid this ever reoccurring again. Then, talking about a nightmare situation, then we have the metal shredder death in Wolverhampton. Bloody hell. The boss just didn't give a monkey's about safety and sent his innocent worker up to unblock the shredder without even a second thought about his life. The fact that he just fell in and then his boss tried to sweep it under the carpet and continued about his day like nothing had happened just makes me feel a bit sick. David's family never got the chance to say goodbye. They never even got a piece of his body, all because his boss had shredded it and dumped him. 7 years just doesn't seem long enough. And then finally, we've got the triple cistern death in Texas. Now that is some nightmare fuel. Being submerged in a pit of water full of decomposing animals is my worst nightmare. I'm really not sure what I would have done in this situation. Like, seeing my dog stuck and needing help, I would have likely climbed into my death as well. It truly is a horrible one. But most importantly, what did you think? As always, you guys know I try and read all the comments below, so do let me know what you thought. But just before I go, if you're into this kind of content and you want to see it ad-free, uncut and uncensored, go ahead and click that link pinned in the description below. And while you're down there, if you're not subscribed, go ahead and click that subscribe button to be alerted at when I release content such as this. But I will see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.